My mother waited until she was dying to tell me who my father was. I wish she hadn't waited, but by the time I understood why she did, it was already too late to thank her. My name is Peter Vance. I grew up in rural Ohio, small town, the kind of place where everybody knows your name and nobody knew your father's. My mother Carol raised me alone. No explanation, no apologies. She worked nights at a nursing facility, days at a diner, and still found time to quiz me on vocabulary words before bed. She never talked about my father, not once, until the night she was dying. I was 31 years old, sitting beside her hospital bed, holding a hand that had gotten so thin I was afraid to squeeze it. The machines beeped their steady, indifferent rhythm, and my mother turned to look at me with eyes more alert than they had any right to be. "Peter," she said, "there are things I should have told you." "Mom, you don't have to." "Hush." Even dying, she could still hush me with surgical precision. "Your father's name is Gerald Brenner. He was a visiting lecturer at the university. We were young. He was persuasive. When I told him I was pregnant, he gave me money and a one-way bus ticket back to Ohio. He told me if I ever contacted him again, he would make sure I regretted it." She closed her eyes briefly. "He has a son, legitimate, named Klaus. He runs the family business now. Gerald is old, sick, and I hear he's recently rewritten his will." She turned to look at me one last time. "I'm telling you this not so you can go looking for trouble, but so that if trouble ever comes looking for you, you'll know what you're holding." She died 4 days later. I spent the next 6 months doing what I do best. I'm a forensic financial analyst. Companies pay me to find the money other people think they've hidden. I am very good at following threads, and Gerald Brenner had left a lot of them. Here's what I found. Gerald was dying, stage 4 prostate cancer. His son Klaus stood to inherit a controlling interest in Brenner Weiss Capital, worth conservatively $600 million. But Gerald, in a moment of either guilt or spite, had begun amending his estate documents to include a second heir, a son he'd never acknowledged. He'd hired a private investigator to find my mother, only to discover she'd died 3 weeks before. But her son, me, was very much alive, which meant I was about to become the most inconvenient person in Klaus Brenner's world. The question was, did Klaus know? 4 months into my quiet investigation, my wife Rachel came home and told me she had a new boss. His name was Klaus. I sat with that for a long time, long enough to ask myself whether this was coincidence, long enough to decide it absolutely was not. So I said nothing. I smiled. I waited. 3 weeks later, Rachel leaned against the kitchen counter with that particular smile she wore when she wanted something and told me Klaus wanted to take us to dinner. "He wants to get to know the man behind the woman," she said. "Sure," I said. "Sounds great." She blinked. I think she was expecting resistance. I just went back to my screen. What Rachel didn't know, what she couldn't know, was that I had been waiting for this dinner for a long time. The restaurant was the kind of place that didn't have prices on the menu, not because they forgot, but because if you needed to ask, you probably shouldn't be there. Klaus was already seated when we arrived. He stood when he saw Rachel, and the way he stood, the slight lean forward, the warmth that flickered across his face before he composed it, told me everything I needed to know about what was happening between them. He extended his hand. "Peter, I have heard so much about you." His German accent was light, barely there. He'd worked to sand it down. "All good things, I hope," I said. "Of course," he said. His eyes said, "You poor, oblivious man." My eyes said, "Absolutely nothing." We ordered. The conversation flowed the way it does when two people are performing for a third. Lots of warmth, lots of laughter, lots of careful avoidance of anything real. Rachel was luminous. She touched Klaus's arm twice when she laughed. She touched my arm 0 times. I ate my sea bass. I refilled everyone's wine. Then, right between the entree and the dessert menu, Rachel placed her hand over her stomach. Subtle, The kind of gesture a woman makes when she isn't fully aware she's making it. But I had been watching her for months. I noticed everything. Klaus noticed too. He glanced at her hand. She gave the smallest nod. Then Rachel looked at me with the full, practiced warmth of someone who had been preparing this moment and said in German to Klaus, "Don't worry, the idiot is so happy about the pregnancy. He thinks it's his. He'll raise your son without ever knowing." She laughed softly. Klaus exhaled. His shoulders dropped half an inch. And I sat there smiling, swirling my wine glass slowly, the way a man does when he has absolutely no idea what's being said around him. I let the silence breathe for exactly 4 seconds. Then I set down my glass, leaned forward slightly, and said in the clearest, most unhurried German I have ever spoken in my life, "Your father says hello, Klaus." The color drained from his face so fast it was almost medically interesting. Rachel's hand froze on the table. I picked up my wine glass. "Now," I said in English, pleasantly, "shall we order dessert?" The silence that followed had weight to it, the specific kind where you can hear people trying to decide what their face should be doing. Klaus stared at me the way someone stares at a piece of furniture that has just stood up and introduced himself. Rachel had gone through approximately 6 emotions in 4 seconds. Shock, confusion, fury, fear, calculation, and then the specific panic of a woman who had just realized she catastrophically miscalculated. I sipped my wine. Klaus cleared his throat. He was not a stupid man. Arrogant, yes. Entitled, absolutely. But sharp. And in the seconds since I'd spoken, I could see him doing exactly what a sharp man does when the ground shifts, calculating. "You speak German," he said, not a question. "Since I was about 19, I said. My mother thought it was a useful language. She was right, as it turns out. Rachel made a sound that was almost a laugh, the kind that comes out when a laugh is the only thing standing between you and a full collapse. "Peter, Just her name, quietly. The way you say someone's name when you need them to understand that whatever they're about to say should be chosen very carefully." She closed her mouth. I turned back to Klaus. "Your father is at Northwestern Memorial, room 412. Diagnosed 14 months ago. Stage 4. I imagine the question of inheritance has felt rather urgent for a man in your position. He began amending his estate documents 8 months ago. His attorneys filed the initial paperwork in November. I imagine that is around the same time you became very interested in my wife." The candle between us flickered. Now I leaned back, completely relaxed, the way a man is relaxed when he's been carrying something for so long that finally putting it down feels like a vacation. "I don't know exactly what your plan was, whether you were gathering information through Rachel, whether you thought proximity to me gave you leverage, whether you had something else in mind. I've had theories. I've also had 6 months to look into your finances, your legal filings, your corporate structure, and 3 offshore accounts your own board of directors would find quite interesting." Klaus set down his wine glass. "I'm not here to threaten you," I said, and I meant it. "Tonight is just an introduction, a proper one, without the performance. So now that we all know what we know, shall we have an honest conversation?" What happened next I didn't expect. Klaus laughed. Not a warm laugh, not a defeated one. A short, quiet, almost admiring exhale, the kind that comes out of a person when they've been beaten at something and they're too honest with themselves to pretend otherwise. "Your father," he said slowly. "Carol Vance. My father talked about her. Not often, but sometimes when he'd had too much to drink." He looked at me. He said she was the smartest woman he ever met. Said letting her go was the only thing in his life he genuinely regretted. The table was very quiet. "He doesn't know what kind of man that made him," I said. "No," Klaus agreed. "He doesn't." We looked at each other across that table. 2 men with the same father, in the middle of a mess neither of us made cleanly. I reached into my jacket and set a business card in front of Klaus. "My cell," I said. "I'd like to see him before the end of the month." I folded my napkin, pushed back my chair. "Dinner was excellent," I said, "the sea bass especially." And I walked out into the cold Chicago night, leaving two people at a table who each had a very different version of what was supposed to happen that evening. Neither of them had been right. Klaus called on a Wednesday. "Leave your name at the nurse's station. Friday, 2 o'clock. His voice was different from the restaurant. The performance was gone. What was left was just a man, tired in the specific way powerful people get tired when they finally stop performing. Gerald Brenner was smaller than I expected. In my mind, built from investigator reports and financial documents and second-hand stories, he'd taken on a kind of size. The size absent fathers take when you spend a lifetime filling in the blank where they should be. The man in the bed was 73, thin the way illness makes a person thin.